Firstly, I'd like to say, Mr Speaker, congratulations on your reappointment. I think I speak for the nation what great relief and joy we had when you were initially appointed in the circumstances, and I don't think we've had any cause for regret since that time. So thank you for all you've done to restore sanity to the House, and good luck with the rest of this term. I know it won't be easy. But it is wonderful to be here as now a member of two classes, and hopefully that gives me the opportunity to learn more and make many more friends.
You've needed more class.
As often said to me that I need more class. But it is wonderful to see, just reflecting on the first speeches we've heard, just what a massive infusion of talent we've had into this House. And listening to the member for Perth talk about his experiences with asbestos victims, that was a very formative experience in my career too as I left university. And I'll never forget reading some of the records that were revealed in some of those processes where American executives in asbestos companies had for many years hidden the results of X-rays on their workers and what they were suffering in terms of the damage from asbestos. And in particular, one conversation stuck out to me, which was a discussion whereby they were arguing whether those records should be revealed to the workers. And one of these executives vigorously argued that that shouldn't be the case. And the response to that from one of these other executives was, well, what are you proposing, that we work our workers to death? And the response to that from the other executive from Johns Manville was, well, we find it's cheaper that way. And so nothing brought home to me more effectively how important the trade union movement is, and effectively the justice that's been achieved and the reforms of work safety that's been achieved has been achieved through that great movement. So also listening to many of these other comments, I just realised what enrichment we've had in this House too by the infusion of our Indigenous representatives, and really is adding to the quality of this place and adding tremendous new perspectives. There are others who we'll be hearing from, and I'm looking forward in particular to hearing from the member for Wills, who I served with in Iraq 10 years ago, where he met his wife Lydia, who's definitely the better half, very intelligent woman and a strong woman. But it's wonderful 10 years later to be here serving in the House together to hopefully bring that experience to bear, along with people like Anne Ali, who's got tremendous background in this counter-terrorism struggle that we are engaged in at the moment. It's also coincidental that I speak today after we've heard from the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition on security matters, and I'm very proud to have picked up responsibility as the Shadow Assistant Minister for Defence Industry and Support. And in these last couple of years I've been working for our leader on security matters, and I'd like to echo his comments from this morning in relation to the bipartisan spirit with which we cooperated with the former Prime Minister, Tony Abbott, and his Chief of Staff, Peter Credlin, who I worked a lot with behind the scenes to ensure that bipartisan approach. And I will say on the public record that I greatly respected Peter Credlin as a strong, intelligent woman, and it seems that some have problems with strong, intelligent women. And I'm glad to say that on this side of the House that isn't a problem for us. But I certainly wish her well, and I'm very pleased to see the security team that has been appointed on this side of the House, and I do believe that we will continue in that very important spirit of bipartisanship in what is an essential aspect of a federal government's responsibility, and we certainly take that very seriously on this side of the House. And I must say that it brings me to the circumstances in which the election was fought, and that we have representation now in this Parliament that seems to hark back to the days between the two world wars, after the First World War and the Depression, when people reached out to ideologies that seem to provide simple answers. And it brings to mind that old saying that for every complex problem there's an answer that's simple, clear and wrong. And for those who are reaching out to those simple answers, I'd say that some of those ideas and approaches that have been put forward by some of the people who have entered this building will not provide greater security. And in fact, in some aspects will endanger that security if it goes uncontested. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to be back in this House to be able to do that contesting. And I will say also that I really hope to engage in a constructive dialogue with the Minister for Defence Industry, but I do warn him that I will challenge vigorously and in detail any attempts to misrepresent the record of the Labor Party and the Labor governments on security and defence industry. There has been some of that, and I intend to contest it. But that then brings me to the primary reason for my being here, which is to represent the people of Eden-Monaro. And I must say that there were many reasons why I think I was returned to this place to do that representation. And there were generic issues which we've heard comment on in relation to health matters. And I think it would be a grave mistake for the government to believe that text messages were the issue for the people of our communities. They were fearful of lived experience and the disappointments and the approach of the death by 1,000 cuts of Medicare and health measures that has been occurring in recent times. And I had farmers and people on the phone to me in tears in anticipation of the extra imposts of the changes that were in prospect for Medicare. And they didn't need me or text messages to tell them about those threats. They were real and they need to be addressed, those concerns. We have ongoing health issues in relation to places like Pambula Hospital, Tumut and Yass, and I hope to advocate for their benefit in this place. We also, of course, had the education issue, and nowhere is that more important than rural and regional Australia. And this was the great promise of the Gonski program. It wasn't the dollars, it was the programs that program funds. In particular, the rural and regional loadings, the loadings for our Indigenous kids and disabled kids. And the early days of that program were having such an impact in my region, in schools like Bega Public and Eden Public, where we have large Indigenous kid populations, just to see the improvements, the dramatic improvements that it was delivering, and why we need to go the full Gonski, as they say. And I hope to continue to advocate for that and to see that brought to fruition. A very important issue for us, right up there in the top three of the issues in our region, was renewable energy and climate change. In all the polls that you will see, our region understands that issue deeply. We're probably the canary in the cage in many ways in the mine, because we are really more vulnerable than most areas of Australia. You know, we have $1 billion skiing industry, and to see the contraction of the snow that's available for that industry over the years is deeply distressing. And obviously, if we don't take urgent action, that industry is under threat. The Sapphire Coast is at risk from, obviously, the sea level rises and salination. We have fruit growers in the southwest slopes who rely on dependable and predictable rain patterns, who cannot afford to be placed in the circumstances we were in that recent terrible drought. So we have many reasons to be fearful of exaggerated climate change through further temperature rises. But more than that, our region saw the massive opportunity that the response to climate change presented. And one of the things I'm tremendously proud of is the great body of policy work that was done by our team during these last few years. And in particular, the central piece of that for me is the Climate Change Action Plan, a magnificent 41-page document that doesn't just comprehensively address the issue of climate change, but presents a program for economic reform that will help drive the new economy that we need. And there was nowhere where the benefit of that investment was landing more profoundly than Eden-Monaro. During the time that I was member from 2007 to 2013, we saw over $1 billion of investment in renewable energy projects alone, leaving aside the issues of subsidiary industry and investment. $1 billion alone in renewable energy projects, the largest single source of private investment we've ever seen in Eden-Monaro, because we have every single available renewable energy resource in our region, and we're close to the grid. So the opportunities for us were enormous. We're also home, of course, to the big granddaddy of renewable energy in terms of snowy hydro. And I will also send this shot across the bow to the government, because we have seen these ideas perpetuated or floated from time to time, most recently in articles in the Financial Review, that we will never sit still for any attempt to privatise the snowy hydro scheme. It was tried by the Howard government in 2006, and widespread community reaction prevented it happening then. We will not let it happen ever. And I'm proud to stand side by side with my mates and colleagues in the ETU who are sound men and women of integrity and fortitude and courage, who really highlighted to us the dangers of privatisation, that there would be job losses in the electricity industry and that there would be price rises and issues that would arise from the security of our grid. And we're seeing all of that playing out. So I'm proud to stand with them in this fight and to keep that battle going. But there were so many issues in our region that our union brothers and sisters were fighting that were so important to my community. Penalty rates, with our high levels of underemployment in our region, where we have people who may only have 2 to 3 days' work a week and need those penalty rates of a weekend in order to put food on the table. You need to put yourself in their position to understand the importance of penalty rates. Our forestry and construction workers who just want to come home in one piece of a night. What can possibly be wrong with that ideal? Our public servants who've suffered from terrible impositions over the last few years, and members here who represent this area know, and a great many of them live in Eden-Monaro and Queanbeyan. Yes. And the government is suffering itself from its ability to deliver even its own policies in that process, and it's grossly inefficient because all we're seeing is the hiring of consultants adding costs to federal budgets without the efficiency result coming from that. But it has a terrible effect on our region. We depend a lot on the driving holiday makers from Canberra and Queanbeyan, and that's put a big hole in our economy. So I want to also highlight in particular, though, a group that are very close to my heart, and they're all around us in this building. The cleaners in this building have suffered terrible impositions under the changes that have been made by this government. It is extremely hard on the wages that they are asked to survive on, to get by and support their families, and it is unconscionable. And I would like to reach out to all members in this House to really address this issue, because it's just unsustainable. And so I'm proud to stand side by side with United Voice to keep fighting that battle as well. And if they're around you, don't ignore them. They're not shadows, they're not ghosts, they're real people. Yes. Real people in this House, and I'm proud to say that many of the people that work in this House all live in Queanbeyan, so we have a big stake in this building. I must say too that the forced mergers in New South Wales were a big issue as well, and this is a process that is deeply flawed, badly executed, and I think many of my fellow colleagues across the other side of the chamber have seen this playing out and feel the same way that I do about the way this has been handled, and some of them have spoken out. But the people of Tumbarumba still are not happy and will not accept this forced merger process. It will not stand for them, and they have commissioned me to take that fight up with Minister Toole, and I will do that. But they're not alone. The people of Bombala equally distressed at what's happened. These were councils that were in the black, that met the Fit for the Future criteria, but were nevertheless forced to merge in any event. And it's this syndrome of people in Sydney thinking, well, we know what's best, and we'll just draw big red lines with crayons on maps in country New South Wales without any consideration for our community of interests, our traditions and our geography. And particularly if you look at my region, we're now bigger than 66 countries in the world, and bloody great mountain range in the middle with a lot of snow and ice during this time of the year. So there are significant issues about how we relate to each other, and the government in Sydney simply ignored all that, and it's not good enough, and we need to come back and have a look at how that's been done. Also, of course, a lot of infrastructure issues impact on our region, and I would call on my colleagues on the other side to work with me to deliver the Barton Highway duplication. It is, and the New South Wales government also needs to see the importance of this as an investment in southern New South Wales economy, the huge potential that we have here now in issues that I've been advocating for 10 years, and they're starting to come to fruition in terms of the opening up of the Port of Eden to commercial use, and also greater tourism through the extension of the wharf and the bringing in of large cruises and boosting our tourism. But soon to be the opening of Canberra International Airport will also provide not only extra tourists from that source, but an opportunity to get our wonderful high-quality produce from this region onto plates in our region and really take advantage of that. From as far afield as the cherries of Young to the beautiful fruit from the Batlow apple growers to our abalone oysters and wonderful seafood from the coast to our beef and sheep meat and our superfine merino. This is a huge opportunity for us, and we need to really work together as a region to exploit the full potential of that. So the Barton Highway is an important piece of inland infrastructure to help make that real. And I need not only this federal government but the state government to realise that it's not about commuters to Canberra from New South Wales, it's a broader regional economic investment. Also, of course, we have tremendous social and economic issues around jobs, and I really will pursue now a strategic economic plan for our region where I hope to bring together all my colleagues of all parties and right across the divide at state and federal level to take advantage of those issues that I've just mentioned, but also to do our best to get a proper rollout of the NBN and to make the most use of it. And I certainly had a lot of potential demonstrated in our region. One significant example has been Jane Kay and her business Bird's Nest down in Cooma. Started out in a simple shop in Cooma and now occupies an entire block of the town, employing 110 people on very magnificent flexible workplace arrangements, largely women in that employment, working around their lives as wives of farmers and mothers and whatnot. So it's a tremendous example of what is possible in rural and regional areas and the potential that the NBN will further open up. So there's a lot for me to do, and I'm very eager to get on with it. One of the most important things I think that has led to me being here is that the community has spoken loud and clear that they must have community-based representation. We have seen a break in our tradition in these last few years of members of both sides who are part of our community, and that just wasn't happening the last couple of years. And I know there's a lot of relieved Liberal Party members in Eden-Monaro who were happy to see the change. And obviously it's now my responsibility to meet those expectations from all those people who said to me they were voting Labor for the first time. I also want to thank all those people in the branches in our region, just magnificent people, and my fantastic campaign and electorate office staff, Riley and Robbie Reinhardt, our campaign manager, just a magnificent bloke who's stuck with me all through a lot of ups and downs, and Linda Coleman and Radmilla Neveska, Sarah Nile, Jill and Brian Brown. He's a really good bloke for an artilleryman. Never held that against him. But so many others, just countless thousands of people who were out there volunteering for us, from the young Labor troops across the border here in the ACT to all our proud union members and tradesmen and women. Really love to pay tribute to Steve Butler and Graham Kelly and Jared Dwyer and Bernie Smith and all those wonderful people who stood beside us shoulder to shoulder. It was an inspiring experience because they all believed in what we believe in terms of the future of this country, and it was an inspiring experience for me. But primarily I must thank my wife and my son. My wife has been with me through all my character-building years of 20 years in the army, through Somalia and Bosnia and Timor and a year in Iraq, and then this sedate experience that I've had here with its high level of security in a marginal seat. So, she's been there all along. I'd like to say it's a partnership of equals, but I know that's a lie. It reminds me of the phrase, behind every successful man is a surprised woman. And so thank you for your support, and also my son as well, who's we're really proud of with his ideals. So I'd like to conclude with this observation, Mr Deputy Speaker, that one of my guiding principles is a dictum by a first century scholar, Rabbi Tarfon, who said that we're not obliged to complete the work of perfecting the world, but we are not permitted to resolve from it. And my view is that I am here to be a part of a continuum of the movement to improve the human condition, and that's why I'm proud to be a part of the Labor movement. And I want to be here to move that ball forward, but be a part of that human chain, the human chain of progress, which is not immutable and it is not inevitable. It requires a lot of passion, sacrifice, leadership and discipline to build it brick by brick with blood, sweat and tears. And I'm immensely proud, particularly, to be standing shoulder to shoulder with these men and women in that endeavour. So thank you for having me back. Cheers.
Yeah. Very good. Right.